Welcome to Red All Over YouTube, episode 7. This is the YouTube version of the Liverpool fanzine, Red All Over the Land, the longest lasting fanzine. Over 26 years now, John Pearman, the editor, isn't it?
That's right, yep.
Yep, and we've got a very special guest for this one. If you've seen the ITV drama Anne, Kevin Sampson is the writer of it. How are you, Kev?
I'm in rude health, thank you very much, Graham. Hello, John. Good to be with you.
Hello, Kev.
And this is kind of full circle for you because you're a fanzine pioneer. You were involved in the first ever Liverpool fanzine.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the end, it was it was more of a cult fanzine. It covered all aspects of Liverpool street life, so it was as popular with Everton fans as it was Liverpool fans. But yeah, those were heady days. You know, I used to contribute to the end, and my lifelong collaborator and buddy Peter Hooton was the editor, Phil Jones. You're making me sound. I mean, I know I look old, but I've had a hard life.
All right. Well, we'll find out a little bit more about that and your relationship with Pete Hooton, and of course the ITV drama Anne and how that all came about, because it's an incredible drama, incredibly moving, and the timing of it could be right and could help to make a difference. Although, you know, when you've got 33 years to cover, you know, timing is one of the things where you could have jumped in anywhere in the story. And but anyway, we'll get to that in a bit. We'll get to John and talk about the fanzine and a recap from something from the last one when we were interviewing Brian Barwick, former Match of the Day boss and BBC boss and FA boss. Somebody knocked on your door, John, and there's a connection to, for anyone that didn't see it, can you just give us a recap and tell us what's happened since?
Yes, my computer had gone down, and it's still down. I'm now working off a laptop until I get my new one. Anyway, I put a message out and found a guy in Chester who used to work on computers, and I found out he lived across the road from me, right across the road. Not even a short throw-in. And when he came in, he interrupted our talk with Brian Barwick, which was being recorded, and he told me his father, John Seeley, had played for Liverpool one game, and he played against Wolves on a Monday night at Molineux, at the final game of the 1965 season, when Shankly basically put the reserves out, and John actually scored one of the 3 goals. Jeff Strong scored one, and Alf Arrowsmith, my favourite Liverpool player at the time, scored the other. And Liverpool got fined for fielding a weakened side, but the Wolves apparently thought that the Liverpool reserves were more of a threat than the first team. Wolves had been relegated, so it didn't matter. Yeah. And there's a guy called George Scott who watches the programme, and I got in touch with him to say, did he know John Seeley? And they did. And George had arranged the original Shankly Boys Christmas lunch at the Shankly Hotel in the Bastion room. And so John Seeley went along to that meeting, to that dinner, and reconnected with people he'd not met for over 50 years, probably longer.
And there's a nice picture of them together in the latest fanzine, isn't there?
Yes, yes. And since then, we found out that another one of those guys, John Stewart, also was at the lunch. He too was never played in the first team, so he was also one of these guys in the Liverpool reserves of the time, and they saw the birth, if you like, of the great Liverpool sides of the 60s. Anyway, they're now in regular touch, and hopefully in the not too distant future we'll be able to have George and one or two of the others on with us and have a chat to them about those.
And it's all because John Seeley's son came to fix your computer while we were talking to Brian Barwick.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He couldn't write that one.
Nothing much has changed, has it? You know, Liverpool getting the FA wagging the finger at them for fielding a weakened team, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's nothing new. It's nothing new. That yeah.
No.
So let's talk about fans, John. And we've had a couple of sets of visiting fans to Anfield who haven't really behaved with the respect that maybe modern football fans should. But should we talk about Leicester City first?
Well, it was more of the away game at Leicester where they were pretty vile,
Yeah.
and it's not necessary now. Whether that was leftovers from the game at Anfield when they lost to a weakened Liverpool side, they beat then a full strength Liverpool side. I don't know, but from what I was told, there was a lot of abuse being hurled at. All sorts of abuse. We won't go down that line, but it
Well,
was
there was some talk that they were doing the classic feed the Scousers on a day when Liverpool fans had been to a Leicester food bank.
well, that's true, but that happens quite often now. Liverpool fans are very generous with these food banks, and they had taken stuff down to the Leicester one, yeah, and they were doing that. But it's not necessary, and basically, a lot of these people that do it are ignorant. That's all
Right.
I can say.
Yeah.
And they're also being very abusive towards Jurgen Klopp, and it was just not pleasant stuff at all. But the Shrewsbury fans, they were spotted walking around Liverpool, chanting something about the Hillsborough families, and again, credit to Shrewsbury Town Football Club, who, from what I was told, conducted themselves superbly on the day, with full of admiration for how Liverpool had welcomed them. They've acted. They've got these two of these guys, and they've banned them for 8 years,
Yeah.
and they're still investigating it. So the thing is, they must have been stupid to do it, knowing somebody would be filming them, and then it was on social media.
Yeah.
Totally unnecessary. And you know, when you think of watching Kevin's program, it just highlights what we've been through for 32 years as Liverpool supporters, the club, and everybody else. What they've been through, and you're still getting these idiots doing this. Totally unacceptable. You know, and my only wish, and I'm not a violent person. My only wish is that they'd done it around Anfield on the day, because they wouldn't have gone into the game. They'd still been
No.
recovering somewhere.
Yeah.
And you know,
And as you say, John, it's all based on ignorance. And after Kevin's ITV drama, Anne, had been shown, I had a mate of mine who's a Watford fan, and he rang me, and he said he learned so much about Hillsborough. And I wonder if, as Liverpool fans, we take for granted, because we know so much more about, because we're a little bit closer to it, and you know, we read the news and read the fanzines, and the Echo has things in there. If you know, more fans around the country learn just what how everybody was treated, and how long the fight for justice has been, and all the little things along the way which Kevin's drama did show. Hopefully that will change somehow. I just hope they watch it. That's all. But it is. It's mainstream. It's ITV. It's not niche. You know, this isn't this is a. You know, it's ITV. It's one of the big channels. It's the biggest commercial channel in the country. So maybe things will change there.
My partner, she saw when Anne went into into Hillsborough the day after, went into Sheffield on the day after, and she was basically shown photographs. Mary said to me, "Did that happen?" I said, "Yes, and a lot more besides." You said you just had to. You've just had to gone through it, and it was something that's, I don't think it's ever been, nothing like it's ever happened before. Not just in football, but in all sorts of life. And it should never have been covered up the way it was. And what Kev's drama did was he exposed so much more, and there's so many more people now will know what actually happened.
Yeah.
And they can't turn around and say, "Yeah, but it's Liverpool fan writing this," or anything like that, because people know now, and it was there for all to see. And I just hope it's a reminder. I've said this before, that when I saw the Jimmy McGovern docudrama back in '96, I turned around to somebody and said, we can't sit here and do nothing. And that's when I started to try and find out a little bit more about who was doing things with the Hillsborough Family Support Group. I met Phil Hammond and one or two more. And then, of course, the HJC, who I really got on well with, and we missed the shop. We missed Jerry, of course, but you know, that they did so much to keep it in the public mind. I don't think it would have stayed in the public mind quite so much if it hadn't been for the HJC at the time. I don't know what Kevin thinks. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to cover there, and just, you know, going back to the Shrewsbury fans. I mean, that game came on the Sunday after the 4-part series and the documentary, so we'd had 5 nights of mainstream coverage on ITV, and I do think there's you know, it's not just this, but there's a common denominator where it's small teams, isn't it? I think there's something kind of attention seeking about those little clubs, and you know, they're trying to get a reaction and trying to, you know, show how hardcore they are. And in that instance, you know, I think also, you know, credit to Shrewsbury, credit to their goalkeeper, because he was the one who really brought attention to it. That was the first that I was aware of it. So I think, you know, I think you were always going to have those type of fans who go and you know, come into Liverpool. It's part of their day out. It's a big, you know, they come into one of the citadels of international football, and they're treating it as a day out and taking the piss out of the locals. They think it's hysterical. It's part, you know, it's on their checklist. And you know, I'm an idealist, but I don't see that changing. Whether you're talking about, you know, Wigan or Burnley or Shrewsbury or whoever. Tell you one thing: Cardiff fans won't be like that. They are proper working class fan base who have, you know, been through austere times themselves, seen the, you know, the death of the docks and the collapse of the mining industry. I will be absolutely staggered if they are doing anything like that. But by and large, you know, this is, you know, it's small time behaviour for little clubs. I think we've got to, as a fan base, you know, as a group, I've just got to try and find a way of just deflecting that and see it not as a backhanded compliment, but just ignore them. But in terms of the impact that the dramas have, and I'm sure we'll come on to this later, I've actually been you know, bowled over by the amount of messages that have come in from fans from other teams, all over the place, literally everywhere, and a lot of it echoes what you guys were just saying, that, you know, there was so little that they didn't know, just in terms of the detail. But also, I think, you know, a common denominator has been that football fans were treated abysmally in the 80s, and it could have been any of those, you know, any clubs who made it to the latter stages of the FA Cup. It was the biggest competition, arguably the biggest competition in the world. Everybody took a huge following, you know, no matter who the team was, they would take a huge following in the FA Cup, you know, semi-finals obviously, but even in the quarters and the 6th round, you know, the 5th round, you'd take a huge amount of fans, and fans were, you know, were familiar. It was an occupational hazard, being packed tight on the terraces, being marched from pillar to post by the police, not being able to look them in the eye, not being able to answer back. We were treated as, you know, as 5th-class citizens. So, of course, you know, I still can't quite describe it as a tragedy, because a tragedy is an accident. But the tragedy of the disaster is that it was, you know, you could see it coming. You could see it coming. There was so many unsafe terraces and such, you know, terrible conditions. And I think that is what a lot of fans from, you know, teams like Spurs and Wolves and, you know, Celtic, Rangers, I had so many messages from people saying, you know, we know what that was like. We were going to the game in that era, and you know, that could have been us. In the case of Glasgow Rangers, it was them, wasn't it? You know, tragically.
Yeah. Ibrox, yeah. All
All
right, we'll move it. Sorry, John.
You're right there, Kev, about the terraces and the behaviour of the police who treated you as you were something left in the gutter, and you know, you were frog marched to and from stations to the ground. you were herded in. There was no doubt about that. It doesn't matter who you supported, you were herded into a football ground as if you were cattle. And it's hard to say. Hillsborough changed all of that. Hillsborough made people open their eyes. But the thing now is, Hillsborough happened 32 years ago. There's a lot of Liverpool fans who are now in their early 20s, if you want, just to give an age group, who wouldn't have known what actually happened then. They weren't born. So this is all new to them as well, and that was the great thing about it. It's got a message over to so many different groups, so many different fan bases as well. So.
Powerful stuff, Kev. Were you under because there's some pretty hard hitting stuff, like the scene that John said about when the relatives were taken into a room and shown Polaroids. Were you under any pressure at all to soften any of the scenes or any of the messages when you were writing it or putting it on?
If I was under pressure, it was pressure from myself, But no, the decision I came to was that we can't pull any punches on the reality of how the families were treated, and what the impact was on them in the immediate aftermath, but also long term in terms of the effect that it's had on their relationships, on the marriages, the families, all of that. So the scene that you're talking about, I interviewed, many relatives of some of those who died, but also people who were in the pens on the day, survivors. And one of the consistent themes was just the dispassionate way that, first of all, the identification process. In one instance, one of the guys told me about this couple like sat back almost with the back legs of his chair off the ground and chucking the Polaroids across. Is that him? Is that him? Is that him? Do you recognize him? Just just so callous and in a time of deep sincere trauma where you are you're hoping for some compassion. What they're getting is the opposite. They're being treated well, and immediately the narrative about drink is coming up. A couple of guys whose brothers, they lost their young brothers, were immediately the way that they were questioned immediately framed them as wrongdoers, rather than the recently bereaved, or rather than somebody who deserved compassion. They were immediately getting onto the, what did you do before the game? Where did you go? How many pints did you have? So there was, I thought that there was an absolute duty to portray that, and if anything, I think it could have been more extreme. But as tough as it is to watch, it had to be like that. That impact had to be driven home. This is what these people went through. And then there's the haste with which that alternative narrative was coupled together about the fans being responsible. So these are all things that we, as you've rightly pointed out, we're intimate with the facts as Liverpool fans. We've grown up with this. We know what happened. I was there. I actually saw lots of the the things that are portrayed. I've seen them firsthand. But in terms of the ongoing impact, to individuals and families and communities, if you pull your punches, that early on, and just as an aside, John mentioned the word cattle. We were herded. I can remember, on a couple of occasions, I've been herded from a train station in an escort to a ground, and if you stepped off the pavement, getting a whack on the thigh, with a baton, and what the officer in question would say is, if you're going to behave like animals, you'll be treated like animals. You used to hear that all the time. We were treated like cattle. And one of the things that I wrote into the script is the scene, quite a poignant scene early on where Anne and Steve's car runs out of petrol, and Steve goes to a nearby farm and asks for help. So it serves two purposes. First of all, there's a cutaway to the actual cattle pens, which is there, for symbolic reasons. It's saying, this is how we were treated, but also, more importantly, more potently, to illustrate the kindness of the people of Sheffield, which was the other side of the coin. In the height of this traumatic, disastrous event, what you were getting was the definition of community, the definition of human kindness, where Sheffield people were throwing their doors open, letting people use the phones, making cups of tea, offering as much solace as it was possible to in the circumstances. And that was the opportunity to pay tribute to that. And that's what that scene represents.
Mm. Well, let's go right back to the beginning then, Kev. Because you're the scriptwriter of Anne, which is what you're known as right now. You grew up in Birkenhead. Were you interested in writing scripts and stuff back then?
I always wanted to be a writer. Definitely,
Yeah.
I think my interests in in no particular order, but it was football, music, fashion, and writing and reading. And from a very early age, my sole ambition was to be the footy writer for the Echo or the Football Echo. That's that to me was just the dream job, because it would bring together two of the big loves in my life. But I think I can't say with any sort of certainty that I always saw myself as a screenwriter, but I was always writing short stories, writing usually in and around football. I can remember doing just a composition at school. I must have only been 11 or so, and it was one of those sort of dream things where your teacher says to you, "Okay, write about anything you want." And I did a sort of a Billy's Boots story about a lad who wanted to play football. It was anyway. That's another story. But I remember it going on for like half of an exercise book. So it was so it was always there. In terms of how that gradually developed into doing it for real, it was. I look back, and in so many instances, it's just pure luck. It's blind luck. And it's writing off, the amount of time spent on, I did what Anne Williams does in the drama. I had one of those like massive, heavy Olympus typewriters, and it was, you had to whack them like,
Yeah.
and it didn't really pay to me.
Well.
Yeah, well, you then had to tip exit out and go again and all of this. So, but I was lucky in a few ways. And first of all, there was like half a dozen music papers or youth magazines, and they all took work from freelancers. So you could go to a gig in Liverpool, write a review of it, send it to the NME, and chances were they would ignore you. But eventually, like I got one accepted, and that was really, that was like the portal to the Magic Kingdom being opened. So I did a few after that. Unfortunately, managed to just as I was starting to get a little bit of momentum and getting some regular work, I did something very, very stupid. I went to, I was just getting, I was getting to like this thing of going to gigs, writing about them, and seeing them in print the following week. So what you have to understand is this is an era that predates email, predates the internet, predates laptops or anything like that. You'd physically type up your review, stick it in an envelope, send it off, to the NME, Carnaby Street, London, and then you would wait. You wouldn't get a phone call, or there was no way that they could contact you or anything other than by your postal address. So you'd wait until the following Thursday to see if your review had been printed.
So the first time you saw it was in the magazine, was in the NME, in the newspaper.
Yeah. In the NME. So it was like that thing of, we all read the Mirror, for example, from from the back page, you pick it up, you read the back page, and then you go like that and go like that, and then you go to the telly, you eventually get to the news. It was like that for me with the NME, because the reviews were at the back. There was being like a letters page, a couple of pages of adverts, Adrian's of Wickford and, of their various sort of club gigs. And then you would come to the live reviews, and the local reviews were on the last pages. They have the big, Earl's Court and Wembley Arena things, but the little ones are at the back. So that would be the first that you'd know of it. And I had seen that this band called the Sex Gang Children were playing. And
in Liverpool,
for me, they were, I think they were from Nottingham, I'm not sure. But I took grave exception to them because the singer spelled his name with two I's. It was Andy with two I's. So I was very, very judgmental in those days. Didn't particularly like that sort of gothy sort of music. The lead singer wore a load of mascara and spelled his name with 2 or 3 I's. So I thought, they're getting it. So I didn't actually go to the gig. I just, wrote up what I thought was quite an amusing but eviscerating review of this band. So here's the chronology. Type it up, stick it in an envelope, go and post it, go round the corner and buy the Liverpool Echo, which in those days is yay big. And it wasn't like front page, but it was a prominent story. It was nightclub burned to ground in club war. So I start reading this. This sounds exciting. And I read it and see that it's the Warehouse Club where this gig was supposed to have taken place like the night before. I can't unsend the letter. I can remember hanging around waiting for the postbox to be emptied, and it just wasn't. So in the end, I just thought, well, do you know what? Just as likely to not print it as print it, and had this excruciating wait for the next week, and did the ritual of looking from the back to the back to the back. Didn't see it. I thought, got away with one in future. Message to self: go to gig reviewing. Turn the next page, and there was this headline that actually turned it into a lead review. Neutered was the headline. So I just thought, oh, gee. So a few days later, a letter arrived through the post from the editor, Neil Spencer, and it just said, your comments, please. And then it was a letter from the promoter saying, hard enough making this sort of music pay without having to deal with rubbish like this. And that was the end of my short-lived reviewing stint at the NME.
So
right up until I think about 1990, I used to buy the NME, and I started buying it in I think 1962. Yeah, so I must have read one or two of them, Kev.
I'm sure you would have done if you read it in those days, definitely.
Yeah, but the advice to any young reviewers is to actually go to the gig.
Yes,
if you're going to do a review. Yeah.
Mind you, didn't they used to say that about some of the people that reported on football? They used to say did they actually go to the game, and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
I just wanted Liverpool to beat Man United 5-0 away.
But you ended up with a really good job. You ended up working at Channel 4 after that, though, didn't you?
I did, yeah, by a circuitous route. But the shortened version of this is that I had started writing screenplays, so I'd spent a few seasons working away. Did the holiday season in Llandudno, and that's just that's been brilliantly depicted by Jimmy McGovern in The Lakes. I'd written this thing called Somewhere, and it was loosely about the time that I'd spent in Llandudno, and it's teenagers from all over, mainly Liverpool and Birmingham. There were a few from Manchester, so it's they're just average age probably from 16 to about 20, and you do you work as dishwashers, sous chefs, preparing vegetables in hotels, bingo callers, bar staff, chambermaids, all sorts of stuff, and it's seasonal employment. But in my case, I worked in a hotel, and I wrote this drama about it. Sent it off to Channel 4, got quite a nice reply, and that led to a few meetings and conversations. And the culmination of it all was that the the youth entertainment departments, who did things like the Tube and the Chart Show and various shows like that. They said, we don't have a budget for drama, but we do like your voice and your perspective on the world. And so they got me in, basically just working for a day a week initially, reading program proposals and doing feedback on existing programs and all of that. And then that gradually led to a bigger and better job. So ultimately, I ended up I was like the assistant editor for youth programming, and then the temporary edit. So I was like, I was like Rafa at Chelsea. I was the interim editor for entertainment for about 6 months as well. Great fun, great fun.
And did you move to London then? Was that when you made the move?
Yeah, well, I had moved already. So the rough timeline here is the mid to late 80s. So it brings us through to Hillsborough. And I'd been getting odd bits of work. Like I had the thing about the way Liverpool football fans dressed up, had that in the face. I'd had my reviews in the enemy. I'd done a few things for ID. So I built up a bit of a body of work, but still felt that, in order to do it properly, and by then, I really did want to be a novelist. I had ideas for books. And I thought, the only realistic way of making that happen is to get down there. And so I took on a variety of menial jobs, and then did that thing of, writing at night time. So that was the background to it. I was actually in London when I got the Channel 4 job.
Right. Which sounds quite glamorous, but it wasn't exactly palatial, your digs in London, was it?
Far from it. No, I had initially like a bed sit in Ladbroke Grove that was so small that from the time, the bed was barely big enough to sleep in. So it was like a 3/4 of a single bed. And if I lifted my left arm out, I could touch the sink. And if I stretched it diagonally, I could touch the hob. There wasn't a fridge. If I put my foot out, I could touch the wardrobe, and that was it. But what it did have, which was just, everything to me, like this tiny little, couldn't even call it a balcony because the landlord had tried to bolt the window shut anyway, but I got that open, and you could stand on this little parapet and look out, and it was actually on Ladbroke Grove itself. So if you're familiar with it, if you look into your left, Ladbroke Grove Station is right there, and the Westway, and what became the Subterranean Club, which I think back then was, it had been the Acklam Hall, but it had closed down. And that was famous for, for pivotal gigs by The Clash. The Clash were from around that area. And, I'd grown up loving The Clash. So to be in their manor, so to speak, was very evocative for a young sort of up-and-coming writer. Yeah. And, that's where I lived in idle bliss for a while.
But you left Channel 4 to set up the film company. Was it Kinesis Films? Kinesis
Films, yeah. So the way Channel 4 works, for all that, we've had Channel 4 for, it's going to be 40 years old this year, isn't it? But people probably don't fully appreciate the way it works. It works more like a publishing house or a magazine in that it commissions programs from independent companies. So obviously, if you're talking about BBC and ITV, they have in-house departments who make all these things. But Channel 4, apart from Channel 4 News, nothing was in-house. So when I got that initial job, what I was doing was reading, independent company would send in an idea for a program or a short kind of trailer for a program and say, we want to, and, I would give an opinion about that. So I then left and became one of those companies and was sending ideas into Channel 4. And yeah, we made quite a few, but the one I think that Kinesis were best known for was a short film about chilling, which was, the first ever Ibiza club culture film. It was fly on the wall stuff. Went out there with a very small crew, shooting on film and Super 8, and just followed this group of clubbers and DJs around, and made the made the documentary on the basis of that, just all those kind of first-hand perspectives. Went down really well, and is still, you know, viewed kind of nostalgically as being the first and one of the best of those sort of club culture documentaries.
But then you returned to Merseyside because of your friend Peter Hooton, or did you return and then met Peter? How did that all work?
So I knew Peter from the match and from the end, and from managing the first lineup of the farm. So the farm had two real phases. There was the brass era, and then the post brass era. So in the very early days, they had a trombonist who was better known as Mr. Tony Evans, the revered sports journalist, and they had a trumpet player called George Marr. And when I say I was the manager, I was the mug that signed up to basically hire the vans and, you know, get them to the gigs and then drop them all off and then get back to the van hire place by 9 o'clock the following morning to get the £10 deposit back. So that was managing. So I knew Huso and Steve Grimes, you know, from the farm. Carl Hunter joined during that period as well. So a lot of the current lineup were part of that era. I then moved to London to do my Dick Whittington and try and get a little bit closer to the coalface. But during that time, obviously, was still in constant contact with, going back for the match for starters. We all, in those days, used to go to the Jester afterwards. I can remember vividly having a conversation after Liverpool Man United just before Christmas, 1-0 brackets, Malby penalty, 23rd of December 89, and saying to Peter in the Jester, we were talking about Happy Mondays. I'd been to see them at the Town and Country Club, and I remembered the Mondays as being, you know, starting roughly the same time as the Farm had, but they had gone from nothing to just being everywhere. So when I was in London and I was part of that sort of house music scene and was seeing the Mondays just absolutely everywhere, going bigger and bigger and bigger, and saying to Peter, you know, would you not think about like working with DJs in the same? And he said, oh God, we already are. Like that's exactly what we are doing. I think the guy's name was Gary Allen that they were working with. So they were already, you know, ahead of that sort of idea, and we're starting to move the sound away from being more of a kind of ska-based thing to being like a live club type sound. So I was really excited by that. And I said, you know, I remember saying to people, like, I know quite a lot of these characters down there, you know, a lot of the DJs, you know, I go to these clubs, stay in touch sort of thing. And that's what led to, so Peter and the Farm were setting up a record label with these guys called Produce Records. And they asked me to come in, not to the record label side, but on, you know, to pick up the reins with the band again. And that's how that all came about, really. So it's just, you look back on it, and as I've said before, you know, luck plays such a huge. If you look at what we did through the lens of hindsight, the success that we had, you know, it was impossible. You know, the likelihood of that happening is almost zero, and yet it did. You know, we managed to ride that crest, really.
Well, Altogether now was a huge hit, wasn't it?
It was. So the first one was Stepping Stone, and that was done with Terry Farley in Magnus's studio. So Suggs and Terry Farley produced that. Suggs produced all of the first album, and then was Groovy Train in the summer, and then Altogether Now, which was just like, you know, huge hit, and that was, you know, from that conversation, you know, just before Christmas, and it was less than a year. You know, you're talking about end of November the following year that Altogether Now came out. So, you know, so much happened, and it all happened so quickly. And as you can imagine, it was just the best laugh. You know, it was a case of, you know, a group of hapless individuals making stuff up as they went along, and yet somehow in a slapstick way, that's actually gathering momentum and becoming popular in a way that none of us could possibly have envisaged.
So does it feel like you've had a career, or you were just having fun and getting paid for it along the way? I mean, obviously there's hard work involved, but how does it feel?
I cannot look back on all the things that I've done for a job and in any way describe that as being a career, because, you know, that involves an element of foresight and planning. The only through line I would say is that everything I've done has been within touching distance of the creative side, you know, of the media. And all the way through, all I've ever done is tell stories. So even you know, my involvement with the band, really, you know, where it was at its most effective was in telling their story and in finding kind of innovative ways of getting the music out there and presenting them in a certain way. But other than that, and I know I've said it a few times, but it was stepping stones. It was one thing leading to another. I did, you know, I mean, I'm not being kind of falsely modest and saying that it was all kind of accidental. You know, a lot of it and I say we because a lot of people involved, we made a lot of that stuff happen through, you know, having a little bit of, you know, a little bit of being streetwise and having a bit of ingenuity and having some really, really good ideas. And where the farm's concerned, having some really, really great pop songs, and you know, and so getting them out there was the difficult part. Once you get them out there, then people connected with them. But career, I can't quite stretch it that far, Graham. No, sorry.
Okay. But I mean, you know, the range of things you've done. I mean, you know, the novels Away Days, which became a film, and Powder. And then that takes us to Hillsborough, because you did the book about Hillsborough. Was it Hillsborough Voices? What was it called?
Yes. Yeah.
Have I got the name of that right? Hillsborough Voices?
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, a bit of background there is that Ebury is one of the imprints at Random House that mainly does the non-fiction stuff. So you know, all your celebrity biographies, all that side of it. They will do cookbooks, but they also have a really great modern history series called Voices, which is major events in modern history told through the first-hand accounts of people who lived through them. So an obvious one would be the D-Day landings. So the editor at Ebury, Andrew Goodfellow, and you know his writer for that tracked down a lot of people who are still alive who recalled it from either being school kids, from being fishermen, from being it's all people who were there, who were actually in the armed forces, and they will give their recollections of the event from their very, very unique perspective. And Andrew asked me so after Truth Day in September 2012, I'd written something for the Observer about the what I thought was the particularly powerful sight of these mums and these really kind of tenacious women who were all standing at the vigil, standing together, and it was Jenny Hicks, Margaret Aspinall, Sheila Coleman, and Anne Williams, and I wrote something for the Observer about that and what they'd been through and the price that they'd paid, as mums and as women, and the way that they'd been treated. And Andrew Goodfellow from Ebury saw that piece and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a Voices, doing a volume for the Voices series on Hillsborough. So that's where that started. In one respect, it was relatively straightforward. I knew a lot of the people involved. I could go to people like Ricey from the HJC and Jerry and Sheila and get the ball rolling. But the more kind of challenging side of it was finding, for example, a Nottingham Forest fan who was prepared to speak, finding a policeman who was prepared to speak. We spoke to footballers who played on the day, politicians who led the whole response and the campaigning, medics. So it's a very kind of rounded view. Again, from people who were actually there and have got a perspective and a story to tell about the day itself, and then the aftermath and the subsequent campaigns. And as part of that process, I interviewed Anne Williams, and first of all, you know, right from the word go, really got on with it. Just really liked her. She displays so many of those qualities of, you know, of kind of, you know, Merseyside working class mums. Was quite self-deprecating in one respect, but really, really tough and straight to the point, you know, in other respects. And through those conversations, you know, she revealed, I thought I knew a lot. I thought I knew an awful lot about Hills, but some of the stuff she taught me was absolutely, you know, it was hair raising, and it was stuff about, you know, being followed by, you know, by plainclothes detectives. It was stuff like having her phones tapped. It was, you know, the extent that she went to just, you know, to never allow the flame to go out. And I remember saying to her, you know, your story is just, it's just so remarkable. It would make a Hollywood movie. It would, you know, it makes Aaron Brockovich seem like small beer in comparison. And she was quite tickled by that idea, you know, genuinely so. So that was really where the idea of, in those days, we were
do you think she ever imagined there would be a 4-part type miniseries made about her struggle for when you say it tickled her, did she just think, well, that no one will ever make that, or did she think, no, that'd be nice to do? What was?
I think knowing how she was, and knowing that her overarching philosophy on everything was nothing is impossible, never give up. I don't think she would have been at all surprised that it ended up getting made. You know, it's so sad that she is not with us to see it, because she absolutely deserves that acclaim and you know, that portrayal, which hopefully will resonate and carry on resonating to future audiences. You know, it's out there now, it exists. But I've got to say, like, her prime concern at the time was who was going to play her.
Well, I'm sure she'd be delighted with what Maxine Peake did, though. I mean, that's some performance. Yeah, exactly.
What a performance, eh?
There's a bloke I want to bring in here, but I'm having trouble getting him on the phone. I'm going to dial him one more time. This is Peter Scarf from HSA, which is the Hillsborough Survivors Support Alliance. You've probably seen the banner on the cop. And I'm just having trouble getting hold of him on the phone. If you are watching, Peter, and you need to turn your phone on or something, because I'm calling his mobile now, but it doesn't seem to be going through, because they're doing a lot of work with, you know, I was speaking to him earlier and he was saying, you know, there were thousands of people, you know, there was over 700 people injured, as well as the 97 who died. But then there were thousands of people like yourself, Kevin, who were there, who will have been affected by it. And, you know, he's working with those people. And
yeah, it's you know, the whole psychology of Hillsborough is fascinating. I've never described myself as a survivor. You know, I always felt that the survivors were the people who were crushed in the central pens, who got out and lived to tell the tale. I've spoken with so many people over so many years, and, you know, a lot of us felt, you know, rightly or wrongly, that there was a hierarchy, and that we came fairly low down in that. And that's not a complaint, by the way. That was us quite, you know, willingly and unconsciously standing back and saying, this is not about us. You know, we were there, but we didn't go through what you guys did. And I think the work that the HSA and the HJC did as well, you know, in recognizing the ongoing mental health aspects, the trauma, you know, the collateral psychological damage, and getting people to, first of all, to recognize it in themselves, to open up, to realize that it's not weak to speak about these things, to seek help. You know, sometimes in some cases, getting counseling for specific things. You know, that is a whole side of the story that very rarely gets told. And we touch upon this in the dramatization. You know, there's a guy that goes into the HJC, and Anne recognizes the signs. You know, they've they've become used to recognizing the signs, and takes them upstairs to talk. And you know, hopefully, if Pete does get on, you know, we can talk about the work that they do in that area. But one of the things that they did was to get in touch with me way before you know, when the series was first announced, and said, you know, can you, when you are, because obviously, you know, we have a duty of care in terms of how we handle just news. So we always ensured that the families heard about anything to do with this production way before the press did, for example.
Right.
And the HSA got in touch and said, could you also copy us in on that? Because we can then, you know, people who we know are potentially vulnerable, we can make sure that they're prepared, you know, that they know this is coming out. And they then have the choice whether to engage or not, whether to watch or not, whether it's going to be helpful or whether it's going to be the opposite. And I think that's, you know, that's such a brilliant role that they fulfill there.
Yeah, well, Pete, I've tried your phone a couple of times there. You know my number. If you give us a call, we'll get you on and you can talk about the work that the HSA are doing. So let's talk more then about the drama, Anne. How did you convince then ITV to make it into 4 parts? Because I was talking to my wife about this tonight, and I said, because she didn't watch it, because I mean, it for some people, they don't want to watch things about Hillsborough. How did you convince them that it needed to be 4 parts? I think it needed to be long because the search for justice was so long, and if you'd just made it an hour and a half or a 2-hour drama, it wouldn't have. How did you get four shows? How did you convince them that it had to be 4 shows?
I think ITV just deserve huge credit across the board. I mean, going back, you know, John quite rightly has pointed to Jimmy McGovern's, you know, pivotal drama documentary in '96, which came at such a crucial time, because I think a lot of us felt that the initial campaigns, in the plural, had started to run out of steam when, you know, and the private prosecutions failed, and then the, you know, judicial review was denied in '94. It didn't seem as though there were a whole load of different avenues to go down. But even prior to Jimmy's drama, in '94, the Cook Report did a dedicated show called Kevin's Mum, which is about Anne Williams's search for the truth. So there was the Cook Report, there's Jimmy's. They've done numerous, you know, specialised documentaries, and were right on board with this right from the start. It was never really about ratings or, you know, audience figures or anything like that. The 2 key figures there, I mean, Kevin Ligo, who's the sort of big boss there, and Polly Hill, who's the head of drama, they both backed it right from the start. And in fact, the idea of doing it as a 4-parter came from them. You know,
right?
I went to them with treatment, you know, with a written proposal about the, you know, the key moments, and I had taken it in, I think it's a 3-parter, but I think the idea was, you know, to try and do it as 3 90-minute films, and they said, you know, something like this, which, you know, even if we're just focusing on Anne, because there was a conversation early on about whether to go on after Anne's passing, and we decided that, you know, not to. But in her case, you know, you were talking about 24 years. So there's an awful lot to pack in there. And there was never a moment where it was a case of having to try and convince them or having to persuade them. They, you know, they were fully behind that. And then that has been the case right the way through to the whole scheduling of it. Because obviously we're not at liberty to transmit the drama while there were ongoing trials and you know, just, you know, things, you know, legal ramifications going on. So effectively, everybody from journalists through to broadcaster I mean, we were all effectively gagged, weren't we? And you can look back on that with a degree of cynicism, you know, this whole thing of, oh, you can't say this while there are trials going on because you might prejudice the trials. Anyway, from August, you know, was when the last of the sham trials collapsed, and in theory, we would have been free to show the drama at any point from then. But it
so
became
so it was made, and it was you just sitting waiting for the time that it could be used. Then
yeah.
How long were you sitting on it then?
For 2.5 years.
Right.
Maybe longer, actually. I mean, I'll work that out in a minute. But you know, for years, yeah, it's been. It was all filmed in the latter part of 2018, so 3 years, wasn't it? But then coming back to the scheduling, they, you know, for all that, and they were really, you know, they were proud of the, you know, the production that we eventually gave them, and desperately, you know, wanted to share it with as big an audience as possible, but decided not to rush it out. There was a slot available in September that we could arguably have gone for, or there was this one at the start of the year, and that is such a statement. You know, if you are leading your years, kind of, I mean, traditionally, what people want on January the 1st, January the 2nd, they want to be spoon-fed. They want light entertainment. They don't necessarily want, you know, the hard-hitting social realism that is a drama about Anne Williams. But that's what ITV went with, and they did the trailers all the way through the Christmas period, promoted it, and it's paid off because it has been seen by a wide national audience. It's been, you know, that comments from people overseas. Don't know how they're getting hold of it, but you know, there's people watching it all over the place, and the response has been phenomenal. It's you know, it's been, as I was saying earlier, it was a thing of, you know, people saying, I really didn't know the half of this. You know, no wonder you people have carried on with this fight for so long. When people have been saying maybe it's time to let it go. But also this thing, you know, especially from football fans saying, you know, we know that it could have been us, and, you know, ultimate respect to all those involved for carrying on, you know, and refusing to give up the fight.
You mentioned earlier that when you pitched it to ITV, there were key scenes in it. Which were the key scenes for you that were really important to get across?
I think firstly, it's Anne's, you know, development from, you know, her transformation from being somebody who was quite passive and quite shy by nature. I mean, just as an aside, a lot of people have been talking about, they thought that she had a bruise on her face. Maxine had a bruise on her face, but Anne had quite a prominent birthmark, and she used to hide it with a fringe, and she always used to keep her eye line quite low. And in every respect, you know, in the best possible sense, she's an ordinary mum from an ordinary place, and is absolutely content with that role, and loves her life, loves her family, and everything is about to be turned upside down. So in reality, for the first year, Anne and Steve, you know, I spoke with Steve Williams, Anne's husband, on numerous occasions, and they blotted things out. They were in, you know, I wouldn't say in denial, but they just couldn't come to terms with it. They couldn't cope, couldn't comprehend what had happened. Anne was on quite strong tranquilizers. They drank quite a bit, and the turning point comes with the verdict of accidental death in the original inquest, and that becomes her wake-up call. She goes from being pretty passive and maybe not necessarily accepting what she's been told, but taking a degree of comfort from the fact that Kevin supposedly has died instantaneously, and his injuries were so extreme that he wouldn't have known anything about it. So from a mum's perspective, she's clinging to that, and she's saying, okay, he didn't suffer. So she then goes along to to his mini inquest, and hears that he might potentially have been alive. You know, there are numerous accounts from people saying that he might have twitched, that he might have opened his eyes, might have spoken. And then she's presented with a photograph of Kevin being given the kiss of life. I said, well, why are they giving him the kiss of life when his injuries are so extreme that he's died within seconds? So this is the the start of the transformation from shy, formby mum into absolutely indefatigable campaigning warrior and seeker of truth. And that was really the key to my document for ITV, is that, this, is not about football. This is a universal story about human resilience, and it's about the power of a mother's love, and how far an ordinary mum will go to do the right thing by her child. And that, I think, is what Polly connected with. I think she, that's the moment where you can see her nodding her head, and I'm thinking, I think we're in with a good chance here.
Yeah. And you mentioned the reaction, which has just been massive, right down to football heroes tweeting about it.
Yes. The first of them was Robbie Fowler, which was just amazing. There was a tweet from God, Cara, Stan Collymore, King Kenny, the King, tweeting about something that that one of his fans has written. It's just a little bit surreal. Loads of them. I mean, so many of them. But Robbie was the first of them, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, which I just thought was brilliant.
Yeah. And what are you hoping then the drama can do ultimately? Because the search for justice, the quest for justice, goes on. Duckenfield seems to manage to dodge everything. What are you hoping the ultimate conclusion could be that maybe the drama helps us get?
I think for all of us, as fans, as Liverpool fans, what we have to look towards is the legacy, and to ensure, because it's taken this long just to establish the basic truth. And going back to those pitiful Shrewsbury fans, I mean, they're such a minority, but they exist, and there are people who either still don't know the actual facts about Hillsborough or choose not to. And what a drama like this, with 4 episodes and an accompanying documentary as well, that have gone out to a national audience, what they can do is serve as a reference point, alongside all those key volumes, Phil Scraton's The Truth, the Hillsborough Independent Panel Report itself, if they ever decide to put it back online, is an incredible resource. And, I'd urge anyone who's curious about this just to delve into some of the, just the section on witness statements being changed. It makes your blood boil. It makes you furious that we lived in and through an era like that, and we're part of a society that can treat its citizens like that. It's appalling. But in terms of what this can do, it can join that body of work and hopefully resonate for generations to come. What two of the very practical things to be platformed, they haven't come about because of this, but I think the people involved have used the broadcast of the Anne Williams drama as a platform to launch. And there's obviously Hillsborough Law, which we need to see become a reality.
Yeah.
And then there's also the initiative, by Maria Eagle and Ian Byrne, and so they've got different versions of this, but the common ground is to have Hillsborough as a subject added to the secondary school syllabus, which I think would be fitting. You're talking about again major events in contemporary history.
Yeah.
And
there's so much to it, from corruption of big organisations to prejudice, to have a group of people who there is a prejudice, because the lies that the police told, that the Sun managed to, the Sun picked up on, or the police engineered the media to get that out there. That kind of stuff wouldn't be believed if there wasn't already the prejudice that there was for football supporters.
As a people, we were vilified, and we still are. And sadly, I don't see that going away.
And particularly Liverpool fans. You had football supporters, and on top of that, you had Liverpool fans as well.
I'm talking about Liverpool people. Scousers have been vilified, and part of the stick that's used to beat us is this thing of victims. There's certainly an element out there that likes to refer to Liverpool fans as the victims. as though that's something that's actually in debate. And the frightening fact is that if people like Anne Williams and Sheila and all the families who campaigned so doggedly for so long, if they hadn't done that, then it's a very different truth that the majority of the country is being presented with. It is like the narrative that was cooked up in the immediate aftermath. So it's taken all this time to actually turn that ship around and actually establish the truth. So what we now have to do is enshrine it and make sure that that remains as the truth first and foremost. Yeah. And if teaching it as part of the national curriculum can be brought about, then that for me is it's valid and appropriate and right, and I would do anything that I can do to help bring that about.
No, it's powerful stuff. Amazing, wasn't it, John?
It is. What I'd like to say, Kevin, is I'd like to know what we can do as supporters now, and through the fans. And we're only a pebble on a mountain, but if we can do anything to promote what you've spoken about tonight, especially Hillsborough law. I did try. Peter said he tried switching his phone back on, Graham. So maybe you can try him again.
I'll try him again. I'll try Peter Scarf again. Yeah.
I'd like to think that we can carry the fight on and get the message across to people.
Yeah.
In any which way.
In terms of the school curriculum thing, if people go on social media, Facebook and Twitter, follow Ian Byrne MP, and you'll see some very, very directives about how people can get involved. But it starts with writing to your local MP, and everybody can do that. It's a case of emailing your local MP, take 2 minutes and say, I am in favour of Hillsborough being added to the national curriculum. So that's one thing. Is Ian Byrne is one of the people who's proactive in so you get information from him.
Okay, well, it looks like Peter's not answering, but John, we can get Peter on again, can't we, on another show, and he can tell us more about HSA and the work they do. And that's also...
I believe he's having problems with his phone. So.
Right, okay. Oh, well, you get that. Well, you get that. Kevin Sampson, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a treat to meet you, because the show, the drama, the ITV drama, and it is something... oh, hello. Peter Scarf's calling him now. Let's just see if... let's just see if I can... There he is. Hello, Peter? No, I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know what's going on with him. But the ITV drama is something else, and maybe that could be part of the curriculum if they do bring it in as a GCSE level. And the Jimmy McGovern one as well.
Yeah, that entire body of work that goes back to, the Cook report is still accessible. Jimmy McGovern's Hillsborough, Phil Scraton's The Truth, Hillsborough Voices, and the 4-part drama, and the accompanying documentary. So there's a lot of valuable stuff. And for anyone who hasn't had a chance to watch it yet, it's still available on ITV Hub. So
it's on ITV Hub. It's on BritBox as well. If you subscribe to BritBox, you watch it ad free on there. But of course, you have to pay a subscription.
Is it on the Virgin Channel in Ireland? I think.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be able to get it. I'm sure. Yeah. So. Yeah.
So it's out there, and I'm really satisfied with how it's been received and how it's travelling far and wide.
It's going good. Peter Scarf, can we talk to you now?
Yes, hi.
Look at that. We finally made contact with Peter Scarf. How are you?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. I've ended up having to use a WhatsApp call. I don't know why. Vodafone must have gone down or something.
Okay. All right. So, well, tell us about HSA.
Yeah, we're a non-profit organisation. We've set up in 2019 to try and help people access therapy, and we've obviously self-funded, and we've sent 98 people for therapy with a 95% success rate. So things are looking good.
Yeah. And what is your personal connection to Hillsborough?
Pen 4 survivor.
Right. Okay. So did you have survivor's guilt, as they call it?
I kind of buried my head in the sand, to be honest. On the 16th of April 1989, I turned up at work at 8 o'clock in the morning and tried to block everything out, and I did that for years. But every anniversary, every inquest, you name it, it just brings it all back. And then, of course, the time when it hit me the hardest was the Duckenfield trials.
Yeah, yeah.
It was time to do something about it.
So you decided to get help for yourself first, and then help for other people in a similar situation?
It was more trying to. I thought I might be able to help others.
Right. Wow. And you've helped 98 so far, and you're also working with Forest fans as well, aren't you? Because let's not forget they were there on the day too.
Yeah. Diane Lynn, who's vice chair for HSA, she reached out to the Forest fans on the last anniversary on Twitter.
Yeah.
And we got a really positive feedback from them, a few negative ones, obviously, but we got a very positive one. Thank you for thinking of us, blah, blah, blah. And we ended up setting up a WhatsApp group for them. So we're supporting some of the Forest fans too. So it's all good.
Now, when Kevin Sampson's ITV drama Anne, when it went on, what kind of reaction did HSA get?
Well, Diane was obviously staffing our Twitter account, and I was following the website, and it's my phone number's on the website as well. So we were getting calls. The WhatsApp group went crazy. 20 minutes in, we
into the first episode, into the broadcast of the first episode. 20 minutes in, you're starting to get
20 minutes in, and we were getting calls, messages, totally inundated till 10 to 2
in the morning.
The early hours of the morning, yes.
Right.
And then it started again from 6 o'clock in the morning, right through the day, and that carried on until the day of the drama. It went quiet when the documentary. It went quiet during the documentary, and then afterwards it started again. So, we were totally inundated.
And John, you're keen to work with HSA and give them get the message across in the fanzine.
Yes, I spoke to Peter early today, and if we can get a series of articles from them that we can put in the fanzine, then yes, we can get the message out there. And this is what I said earlier to Kevin: if we can spread the word and keep it in the public domain, then that's what we've got to do. Because, like I said earlier on at the very start, we're 30 odd years into this now. There's a lot of people out there, Liverpool fans all over the country, who don't know the real impact that Hillsborough had on not just people on Merseyside, but all over the country who followed Liverpool. You know, it's everywhere, and there's been so many things that's happened there's one thing that this country should be ashamed at the way it's covered up the injustices, you know, and Peter said buried his head in the sand. I don't know what the governments of all governments of this country have done before and since, and hopefully Hillsborough law will start to change that. And if we can get that word out there, and if it gets into the school, under the school curriculum, then fantastic. You know, all these past years won't have been in vain if we get that going. It's got to stay out there. It can't be forgotten, because that's the one thing that the government wanted. They want it forgotten. They'd have loved it if we'd have gone away like 4 or 5 years afterwards and said, that's it.
Yeah, but that applies to, sadly, that applies to Labour governments as well as Tory government.
Yes, definitely.
Tony Blair famously wrote on one memo that he was given, what's the point? So you
Yeah.
know, there are noble exceptions. There are individuals, you know, individual MPs, some, you know, some Tories, you know, and Malcolm Thornton was a Tory or a Liberal, but as institutions, unfortunately, you know, government has tried to suppress the truth up until the 20th anniversary.
But I mean, I will remember that, and I sat. I could, if I'd have leant over, I could have touched Andy Burnham. I just thought it was fun. What he did, and I can remember the shock on his face inside when the crowd started to chant. But he'd come up and basically said the Prime Minister wishes you, yeah, and that was it. You know, the wrong words or the right words in one respect, because that was that lit the fuse, and from that on, and I can't remember exactly how long it was justice for the 96 was being shouted, but it was a hell of a long time. And Andy Burnham stood there, nodded his head, and that was it. Yeah, you know, and it's something that will stay with me forever, because
he says in the I don't know if you've seen the documentary, but he relives that moment in the documentary, and he said, you know, that was the moment that the message went into people's living rooms. So in that respect, you know, it was a turning point. And then the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown phones him up and says, "Okay, what can we do?" And you know, everything accelerates from there. Guys, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. This has been an extraordinary pleasure and privilege, but it's knocking on towards 8 o'clock. And
okay, fair enough. Can we just? Well, what's next for you then, Kevin?
So quite a contrast in terms of the next in the pipeline. I've been working on a script about Courtney Love's little charted stay in Liverpool when she was a 16-year-old, and she attributes everything that happened since she said she learnt to be a star in Liverpool. So she was knocking around with people like the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, Pete Burns, and it's an origin story about Courtney in Liverpool in 1980.
Brilliant. Yeah. That'll be great. And where can we find out about you and what you're up to? More about you? Is there a Kevin Sampson website?
Oh, about me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, don't do anything like that. No. I mean, I'm doing this out of reverence for John Perman and my lifelong love of the rattle. But
okay.
After this, the hood's going up again, and I'm walking around with a big stick on nose. No, don't want.
Okay. And Peter Scarf, I hope you're still there. How can we find out more about HSA?
Obviously, we have a Twitter page and we have a website. So yeah, we're on social media, so we're easy to find.
Brilliant. HSA. And if you just put HSA, I know if you just put HSA in Google, it comes straight up and everything's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's there.
Hillsborough Survivor Support Alliance. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Peter Scarf, thank you very much for being on. Kevin Sampson, I'll let you get away because you want to get away. John Pearman, thank you so much again for 26 years of Red All Over the Land. You haven't managed to say much tonight, but never mind.
No, well, I bow to the main man.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and Kev, if we do get in
the... I'll see you at Flagpole Corner. Take care.
No, I'm round the other side near the main stand. But if we ever do get allowed back in the cop bar, first beer's on me.
Hold you to that.
All right. Thanks everyone. Okay. Remember to keep up to date with everything in Red All Over the Land. If you don't go to the match and you can't pick one up, this is the latest issue. It's just out. It was on sale at the Brentford game. Was the first game it was on sale. But you can subscribe if you go to redallovertheland.com. John Pearman will sort you out there and make you subscribe, and it'll show up in your mailbox. You don't even have to buy it when you're at the match, especially if you're having trouble getting in with the new phone system thing, which seems to be getting better. But thanks to everyone tonight, and please remember, you'll never walk alone.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Peter.
See you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.